February 12, 1945. Deep within the shattered remnants of the Hurtgen forest, Germany. The world has been reduced to the color of mud and the sound of dripping water. For 3 days, that's all there has been. Water seeping through the canvas of the Opel Blitz truck, water trickling down the splintered trunks of pine trees, water pooling in the dark, hungry craters left by American artillery. For Hannah Richter, a 21-year-old Nachrichten helper in a communications auxiliary, the world has also shrunk to the rhythmic crackle of a field radio and the bitter, metallic taste of fear. She clutches a Bakelite headset to her ears, the leather pads cold and damp against her skin. Outside the truck's covered bay, the groaning retreat of the 272nd Volksgrenadier Division continues. Men, more boys than men, trudge past, their faces hollowed out by exhaustion and defeat. Their gray-green greatcoats are stained black with rain and filth. They don't look like the proud soldiers of the newsreels. They look like ghosts, haunted by the forest itself. A sudden, concussive whump nearby makes the truck shudder. Hannah flinches, her knuckles white on the radio dial. A handful of wet soil and pine needles patters against the canvas roof. They are close. Too close. The Americans. The voice of her commanding officer, a weary Oberleutnant with a map-creased face, crackles in her ear. Signal Post 7, report status. Over. Hannah presses the transmit button. Her voice is a strained whisper. Post 7, no contact with command for 2 hours. We are isolated. Repeating, we are isolated. Over. The only reply is a wash of static, a sound like tearing paper that seems to be swallowing the entire German front. The Oberleutnant is gone. The line is dead. For the first time in her year of service, she is utterly, terrifyingly alone. Then, a new sound cuts through the dripping quiet. It's not the familiar roar of a Panzer engine or the cough of a German half-track. It's a low, grinding rumble, accompanied by a metallic squeal that sets her teeth on edge. It's the sound of an M4 Sherman tank chewing through the forest floor. You can feel it in your bones before you see it, a vibration that travels up from the earth into the very soul. A shout erupts from outside. Amerikaner. Panzer. Panic ignites. The handful of soldiers near her truck scatter, melting into the grim maze of trees. One of them, a boy no older than 17, throws his Mauser rifle down as if it were on fire and simply runs. Hannah's heart hammers against her ribs. Her training is clear: destroy the communications equipment. She reaches for the small thermite charge kept for this exact purpose, her fingers fumbling with the pin. But it's too late. The canvas flap is ripped open. Sunlight, gray and weak, floods the dark space. Framed in the opening is a silhouette. A man. He wears a helmet she's only seen in grainy photographs, a strange, bowl-like shape. In his hands, he cradles a weapon she doesn't recognize, a Thompson submachine gun, its muzzle a black, unblinking eye. He is huge, or seems so from her position on the floor. He says something, a short, guttural command in a language she barely understands. English. Out. Get out. Hands up. Her body moves before her mind can process the command. The thermite charge falls from her numb fingers, rolling uselessly under the radio set. She scrambles out of the truck, her boots sinking into the soft, churned mud. The air is cold, sharp with the smell of wet earth and diesel fumes. More of them are emerging from the trees. GIs from the U.S. 28th Infantry Division. Their uniforms are a different shade of green, their faces smudged with dirt and fatigue, but their eyes are alert, predatory. Hannah raises her hand slowly, the sky feeling impossibly heavy above her. Her world has just ended. The radio is silent. The forest is silent, save for the idling engine of the Sherman tank, its long 75mm gun pointed directly at her. She sees the faces of the American soldiers now. They are young. as young as the boys who just ran. One of them chews gum, his jaw working rhythmically, his expression a mixture of boredom and caution. He looks at her, his eyes lingering for a moment on the lightning bolt insignia of the signal corps on her collar, then dismisses her, turning his attention to the other surrendering Germans being rounded up. She is no longer Hannah Richter. She is a prisoner. A piece of the war to be collected, sorted, and processed. As they are herded into a ragged column, a single, terrifying thought, planted by years of relentless propaganda, begins to take root in her mind: what happens now? The march away from the front is a journey through a landscape of purgatory. The Hurtgen forest, which the Germans had called the West Wall, the impenetrable shield of the Reich, is now just a graveyard of ambition. Shattered trees stand like skeletal sentinels. Abandoned equipment lies rusting in the mud, a German Pak-40 anti-tank gun tilted at a drunken angle, a Kubelwagen overturned in a ditch, its wheels spinning idly in the breeze. And bodies. They lie half-submerged in the muck, their grey uniforms nearly indistinguishable from the earth that is already reclaiming them. The Americans walk past them with a practiced indifference. Hannah keeps her eyes fixed on the back of the man in front of her. To look at the dead is to imagine joining them. To look at the American guards is to invite scrutiny, and scrutiny is something she cannot bear. She is one of only 3 women in a column of nearly 50 captured soldiers. The other 2 are nurses, their white aprons sullied with blood and dirt, their faces masks of stoic exhaustion. Hannah feels younger, more vulnerable. Her uniform is that of a soldier, but she has never fired a shot in anger. She was a typist from Dresden, skilled with Morse code and frequency charts, who believed she was doing her part for the fatherland far from the fighting. The war had other plans. Sergeant Frank Miller of the 28th Keystone Division watches the column of prisoners shuffle past. To him, they are not soldiers or nurses or typists. They are POWs, prisoner of war. A neat, tidy acronym for a messy, complicated reality. His job is to get them from point A, the chaotic front line, to point B, a temporary collection center in a captured German village a few miles back. He's tired. A deep, bone-aching weariness that has settled into him after months of fighting in this god-forsaken forest. He's seen too much death to feel much of anything pity, anger, or triumph. All he feels is a dull, persistent need to see this through, to get the job done, and maybe, if he's lucky, get a hot meal and a dry pair of socks. He notices the young woman with the signal's insignia. Blonde hair, escaping in damp strands from under her field cap. Eyes wide with a fear that seems different from the dull resignation of the male prisoners. He's seen it before. He knows what their propaganda tells them. Goebbels' machine paints the American GI as a savage, a degenerate, a rapist. He shakes his head, a small, weary gesture. It's all part of the noise of the war. The prisoners are given nothing to eat or drink. The GIs have their own sear rations, and there are none to spare for the enemy. The hunger is a hollow ache in Hannah's stomach, but it is nothing compared to the thirst. Her tongue feels thick and dry in her mouth. Every rustle in the woods, every shouted command in English, sends a fresh jolt of adrenaline through her veins. She remembers the posters in Dresden, the stark, terrifying images of monstrous Allied soldiers looming over helpless German women and children. She remembers the fervent, breathless warnings of her block leader, the local party official, about the fate that awaited any woman who fell into enemy hands. "They will defile you," he had hissed, his eyes gleaming with fanaticism. "They will destroy the honor of the German race." After what feels like an eternity, the trees begin to thin. They emerge into a clearing that contains a small village, or what's left of it. Stone houses stand gutted and roofless, their windows like vacant eyes. In the center of the village is a large stone barn, its heavy wooden doors thrown wide open. This is Point B. The prisoners are shoved inside. The air is thick with the smell of old hay, manure, and the unwashed bodies of the 100 or so men already crammed within. It is cold, the stone walls radiating a damp chill that seeps through Hannah's wool tunic. The great doors are slammed shut, plunging the interior into a gloomy twilight, pierced only by thin shafts of light from cracks in the walls. A bar thuds into place on the outside. They are caged. Hannah finds a small patch of wall to lean against, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible. The murmuring inside is in German, a mix of dialects from all corners of the Reich, but the topic is the same. What will they do with us? Where are we going? For Hannah, the question is more specific, more personal. Her gaze drifts to the heavy barn doors, behind which stand the men with the strange helmets and the easy confidence of victors. Her fear is no longer a vague dread. It is a sharp, specific terror, coiling in her gut like a cold serpent. The hours inside the barn crawl by with agonizing slowness. Time loses its meaning, measured not by the hands of a clock but by the shifting slats of light that creep across the dusty floor. The initial murmur of voices dies down, replaced by a collective, weary silence. The prisoners sit or lie in the scattered hay, islands of private misery in a sea of shared defeat. Hunger gnaws at Hannah, a dull, persistent ache. But it is the uncertainty that is the true torment. Each sound from outside, the rumble of a truck engine, the crunch of boots on gravel, a burst of laughter in English is a potential harbinger of their fate. Hannah sits apart from the other two women, the nurses. They huddle together, whispering in low tones, finding some small comfort in their shared profession. Hannah has no such bond. Her role as a helferin places her in a strange limbo, not quite a civilian, not quite a soldier. She feels exposed, her uniform marking her as part of the military machine, yet she lacks the hardened shell of the combat veterans around her. She watches the men. Some sleep, their bodies contorted in uncomfortable angles, finding a temporary escape in oblivion. Others stare blankly at the rough-hewn wooden walls, their minds 1,000 kilometers away, back in homes that may no longer exist. Suddenly, the heavy bar on the outside of the doors scrapes open. The sound is brutally loud in the quiet barn. Every head turns. The doors swing inward, flooding the space with the cold, gray light of late afternoon. Two American soldiers stand silhouetted in the opening. One holds a clipboard. The other cradles a rifle, held loosely but ready. "All right, listen up," the one with the clipboard says, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. He is Sergeant Miller. He doesn't look at them as people, but as a list to be processed. When I call your name, you get up and you come outside. Single file. No talking. He begins to read from the list, butchering the German names with his flat, Midwestern accent. Schmidt, Karl. Bauer, Friedrich. Vogel, Hans. With each name, a man rises stiffly from the hay, his face a mask of apprehension. He shuffles toward the door and disappears into the light. No one knows where they are going. To another holding pen? To a formal camp? Or to something worse? The barn grows emptier, the remaining prisoners more tense. The space between them seems to widen, amplifying their isolation. Hannah's heart begins to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She feels a cold dread seep into her limbs. The process feels so methodical, so impersonal. It's the detached efficiency of it that is most terrifying. They are being sorted. Like cattle. Like objects. She presses herself further against the cold stone wall, wishing she could simply disappear into it. The sergeant continues down his list. Hoffman. Ziegler. Kraus. The pile of men at the door dwindles. The nurses are taken, one after the other. They walk out with their heads held high, a final, small act of defiance. And then the barn is nearly empty. Only a handful of men and Hannah remain. The sergeant scans his clipboard. He squints, trying to make out the next name in the fading light. He looks up, his eyes sweeping over the few remaining figures. Richter, Hannah. The name hangs in the air, alien and strange in his American mouth. For a moment, she doesn't move. It's as if he has called out to someone else. The world seems to slow down. She can feel the eyes of the remaining men on her. She can feel the stare of the guard in the doorway. There is nowhere to hide. Richter, Hannah, the sergeant repeats, a note of impatience creeping into his voice. Let's go. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, she gets to her feet. Her legs feel unsteady, disconnected from her body. She takes one step, then another, her worn leather boots scuffing softly in the hay. The two soldiers in the doorway watch her approach. One of them, the one with the rifle, shifts his weight. The movement is small, insignificant, but to Hannah, it is filled with menace. The propaganda films flash in her mind's eye. The leering faces. The warnings. The honor of the German woman. This is it. This is the moment. They have separated her, the last woman. They are taking her somewhere else. Not with the men. As she reaches the doorway, stepping from the gloom of the barn into the stark, cold air, she stops. Sergeant Miller looks at her, his expression neutral, waiting. She opens her mouth, but no sound comes out. She swallows, her throat painfully dry. She looks past him, into the village square. There is a small stone building to the side, a former schoolhouse, its windows dark. Another soldier is waiting there, motioning for her. They are taking her there. Alone. She turns back to the sergeant. She must say something. Anything. A plea. Her voice comes out as a choked, desperate whisper, barely audible, the German words raw with a terror he cannot possibly comprehend. Bid, nicht hier. She sees the confusion on his face. He doesn't understand. She tries again, forcing the clumsy English words past the lump of fear in her throat. Please, not here. Sergeant Frank Miller stares at the German woman. He heard the words, but they make no sense. Not here. What does that even mean? He's just following orders, processing prisoners. The schoolhouse is where Lieutenant Davis is conducting preliminary interrogations. Standard procedure. He frowns, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. He doesn't have time for this. Just move, he says, his voice firm but not unkind. He gestures with the clipboard toward the schoolhouse. Let's go. Hannah feels a paralyzing despair. He didn't understand. Or he didn't care. The soldier waiting by the schoolhouse steps forward and gently takes her arm. The touch is light, professional, but to her, it feels like the grip of a predator. Every instinct screams at her to fight, to run, to scream, but her body is frozen, locked in a state of surrendered terror. She allows herself to be led across the muddy square, each step an eternity. The door to the schoolhouse creaks open. She is guided into a small, sparsely furnished room. A single wooden desk sits in the center, with two chairs. On the desk is a field telephone and a stack of papers. A kerosene lamp casts a warm, flickering glow, pushing back the encroaching twilight. The air inside smells of damp stone, old paper, and freshly brewed coffee. The scent is so normal, so incongruous with the horror she anticipates, that it makes her feel dizzy. Behind the desk sits a man. An American officer. A first lieutenant, judging by the silver bar on his collar. He is young, perhaps only a few years older than her. His uniform is clean, his dark hair neatly combed. He looks up as she enters, and his face is not what she expected. He is not the blonde, blue-eyed brute of the propaganda posters. He is of Japanese descent. This fact is so startling, so completely outside her frame of reference, that for a moment her fear is eclipsed by sheer confusion. The officer nods to the soldier who brought her in. That will be all, Corporal. The soldier leaves, closing the door behind him, and the quiet click of the latch sounds like a death sentence. She is alone with him. The lieutenant gestures to the chair opposite the desk. "Please, sit down." He speaks German. Not the clumsy, accented German of the sergeant, but fluent, educated German. His voice is calm, professional. Hannah remains standing, rigid, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She cannot bring herself to move closer. This must be a trick. A performance to lull her into a false sense of security before the inevitable violation begins. The officer, Lieutenant Kenji Tanaka of the Military Intelligence Service, watches her. He has seen this kind of fear before. It's a specific, gendered terror, fueled by a state-sponsored campaign of lies. He understands what she is thinking, what she is expecting. He knows that aggression or impatience will only confirm her worst fears. He picks up a metal canteen cup from the corner of his desk. Steam rises from it. "Coffee?" he asks, his tone conversational. "It's American coffee. Not very good, but it's hot." Hannah says nothing. She just stares at him, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. Tanaka sighs softly. He decides to get straight to the point, but gently. "My name is Lieutenant Tanaka. I am here to ask you a few questions. Your name. Your rank. Your unit. That is all for now. You are a prisoner of war under the protection of the Geneva Convention. You will not be harmed." He says the words slowly, deliberately, letting each one sink in. "You will not be harmed." Hannah hears the words, but her mind struggles to accept them. It's a lie. It must be. Why else would she be here, alone with him, in this quiet room? She braces herself, waiting for the facade to drop, for the calm voice to turn into a snarl, for the professional demeanor to melt away into violence. But it doesn't happen. The lieutenant simply waits, his hands resting on the desk. The silence stretches, filled only by the soft hiss of the kerosene lamp. He doesn't move toward her. He doesn't raise his voice. He just waits. And in that quiet, sustained moment of non-aggression, the first crack appears in the wall of her certainty. He had offered her coffee. He had spoken to her in perfect German. He had told her she would not be harmed. Little things. But they were all wrong. They didn't fit the narrative that had been drilled into her for years. Slowly, hesitantly, she takes a step forward and sinks into the chair. It feels like a monumental act of surrender. The lieutenant gives a small, encouraging nod. "Good. Now, your name, please." "Hannah." "Richter," she whispers, her voice hoarse. "Your rank and unit." "Nachrichtenhelferin 272nd Volksgrenadier Division." He jots down the information on a form. The scratching of his pen on the paper is the only sound. It's all so bureaucratic. So mundane. He asks her about the last location of her unit's command post. She tells him. He asks about the strength of her company. She tells him what little she knows. The questions are purely military, impersonal. The interrogation lasts no more than 5 minutes. When he is finished, he puts down his pen. "Thank you, Fräulein Richter. That is all. That is all." The words hang in the air. That's it? No threats? No violence? No humiliation? The anticlimax is so profound, so jarring, that her mind cannot process it. The terror she has been holding at bay for days, the monstrous expectation she has been steeling herself against, suddenly has nowhere to go. It's a phantom. It was never real. The realization crashes over her with the force of a physical blow. The propaganda was a lie. The fervent warnings were a lie. The entire foundation of her fear was built on nothing. And in that moment, the dam that has held back her fear, her exhaustion, and her despair for so long finally breaks. It doesn't start with a scream. It starts with a single, shuddering gasp. Her shoulders begin to shake. A low, guttural sob escapes her lips, a sound of profound, agonizing relief. She covers her face with her hands as the tears come, hot and unstoppable. She is not crying out of fear of what is happening. She is crying because of what is not happening. She is crying for the lie she had believed, for the terror that had consumed her, and for the simple, shocking, disorienting kindness of a cup of coffee in a quiet room. Lieutenant Tanaka watches the young woman break down, his expression calm and patient. He makes no move to comfort her, knowing that any physical contact would be misinterpreted. He simply gives her the space to let the emotional storm pass. This, too, is part of the interrogation. The collapse of a worldview is a powerful thing to witness. It is more effective than any threat, more disarming than any physical force. He has seen it before, the moment a prisoner realizes that the monsters they were warned about are just men, tired and professional, doing a job. After a few minutes, Hannah's convulsive sobs subside into quiet, shuddering breaths. She keeps her face hidden in her hands, consumed by a profound sense of shame. She feels foolish, naive. How could she have believed such grotesque stories? The man in front of her has shown her nothing but professional courtesy, and she had been prepared for the absolute worst. The chasm between her expectation and the reality is dizzying. It makes her question everything else she has been told, everything she has fought for. "The corporal will take you to the other women now," Tanaka says softly, his German still precise and calm. "You will be given food and water. You will be transported to a permanent POW camp in the morning." Hannah slowly lowers her hands. Her face is streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. She can't bring herself to look at him. She just nods, a small, jerky movement. She feels hollowed out, empty. The terror is gone, but in its place is a vast, desolate uncertainty. If the Americans were not the monsters she was told they were, then who was the enemy? What was this entire, catastrophic war even for? The door opens and the corporal steps back in. He looks from the lieutenant to Hannah, his expression unreadable. At a nod from Tanaka, he gestures for her to stand. She rises on shaky legs and allows him to lead her out of the schoolhouse, back into the cold night air. Sergeant Frank Miller is leaning against a jeep, smoking a cigarette, when he sees her emerge. He watches as she is led toward a different building, a small house where the other female prisoners are being held. He notices the change in her immediately. Before, her face was tied with fear, her body rigid with defiance. Now, she looks broken. Not physically harmed, but as if some essential internal structure has collapsed. Her shoulders are slumped, her walk is listless. The terror is gone, replaced by a profound, empty exhaustion. He has no idea what happened in that room. He just knows that the woman who went in is not the same one who came out. On a sudden impulse, he walks over to her as the corporal opens the door to the house. He holds out his pack of Lucky Strikes. "Cigarette?" he asks, the word feeling clumsy in his mouth. Hannah stops and looks at him. Her eyes, red-rimmed and weary, meet his for the first time. She sees not a monster, not a conqueror, but just a tired soldier with weary lines around his eyes. A man, like any other. She shakes her head slowly. "Neen, danke. No, thank you." Her voice is quiet, but it's steady. The terror is gone. He just nods, puts the cigarette pack back in his pocket, and watches as she disappears inside the house. The door closes, and he is left alone in the quiet, muddy square, under a sky full of unfamiliar stars. He still doesn't understand her plea, "Please, not here," but as he looks from the dark barn to the lamplit window of the schoolhouse, a small piece of the puzzle clicks into place. He thinks of the stories they tell about the enemy, the posters, the films. And for the first time, he truly considers the stories the enemy is told about them. The war will go on. Tomorrow, there will be more fighting, more prisoners, more death. The great, impersonal machine will continue to grind forward. But for a few people in a forgotten German village on a cold February night, something has shifted. A wall of propaganda, built of fear and lies, has been breached not by a tank or an artillery shell, but by a quiet question, a cup of coffee, and an unspoken truth that passed between victor and vanquished. In the heart of the war's immense cruelty, a tiny, fragile moment of humanity has occurred, a reminder that the lines drawn on maps are never as clear as the ones that run through the human heart.